Hello and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
And I'm your co host, Nathan Rittenhouse. In this episode, Cameron asked me to read an article on the impact of AI in theological education. And I took that article and had AI summarize it for me, and then we had a conversation about it. Well, I did read the article too. But anyway, it's a big topic coming soon to a church or a theological institution near you. We play with some of the ideas, what we think is going to be helpful, where we're concerned, but ultimately where we're optimistic about the way in which the church will adapt to and use technology well in the future, as it has every other technology in the past. Continue to like, share, subscribe, talk about what we're doing. If you want to support it, you can go to toltogether.com and click on the donate tab. Thanks so much.
I want to talk about the inevitability of AI, not just in higher education, but AI in seminaries. And certainly AI basically outpacing online seminary education. There's a very provocative article on this by Cameron Schaefer. You know it's going to be good because his name is Cameron.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah.
We crooked noses must stick together. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up the meaning behind the name Cameron. But this article is it's
Mere
notable for a
Orthodoxy. Did
number.
you say that?
No, I didn't. It's on Mere Orthodoxy. Check it out. It's notable for a number of different reasons. First of all, I would say that this article is not reactionary. And
Mhm.
given the age of the article writer, the author, otherwise known as an author, this makes sense. He's a younger pastor completing his PhD right now. So he's not as so there's not a tone of overwhelming fear and anxiety in this piece, which I really appreciated. But basically he's saying, and if any of you for those of you who have played around with AI already, many of you have, you will already begin to start to sort of feel the creepy implications of how absolutely just it's hard to even to grasp all the implications of what this tool will do. But basically how it can in many ways be more human than human in a certain sense that, if you have a really advanced language, model and it has stored in itself, vast tomes and I mean, all of the great theologians, Augustines, all the Luthers, all the Aquinuses, and it can synthesize all of this instantaneously. You have at your disposal an absolutely earth-shattering teaching tool. And so, yeah,
If,
there are if, but no, I mean, I think there are some of these things that are basically established and that are gonna happen and that are on the horizon. But part of what he one of the so I'll say one of his theses, and we can stop there and I'll kick it over to Nathan for a little bit, is that in order to compete or in order to deal with this AI challenge or threat, depending on how you want to see it. And he's speaking specifically about seminaries. There's a larger conversation about higher education in general and the humanities in particular, but he's speaking to seminaries. What they're going to have to do is pivot away from marketing themselves, and marketing is necessary language here. In order for these institutions to stay afloat, they've got to make money and they've got to bring in students. And so the argument goes that, well, why would we do that anymore if we have now AI technology that is far superior to any of these online models and has already made them look absolutely obsolete. So he's saying pivot away from marketing yourself as a source of information and pivot to a curators of formation is what he says. So, if it's an online program, you're going to have to build in residencies, you're going to have to build in community aspects where you're actually interacting with people. And it's all about who you are becoming, the kind of person you are being formed into by those around you, and especially by mentor figures and people of greater spiritual maturity who are leading you through the process. I'll stop there. So many
yeah.
interesting
So
facets. Yeah.
I'm not afraid of this. But I think there are things that I'm not afraid of this because of the technology. I'm concerned about it because of the way that I know humans are. Let me put that out there. So a lot of this is we don't want to reductively think of people as just information processing units. If so, then yeah, AI can already, you know, put you in the dust in that. So this idea of formation and what it means to be human is imperative. Here's what I've been saying for like the last 3 years is that undoubtedly the future of education is online. And there's no reason that that won't be true for theological education. So I'm fully on board with that, Cameron. Now, you will still have, but you think about it, you take one of your large seminaries, really all they need is a recording studio and a couple great professors to come in 2 or 3 weeks out of the year and crank out 25 videos. You don't need somebody landscaping and plowing snow and doing college admissions and all, like you don't that'll but anyway, so the future of theological education is online. However, all of the skills that you need to produce a pastor, none of those can be taught online. This to me is the rub of the future, and I think is what's being hinted at in this article of saying the ability to sit down, look somebody in the eye, have a prayer with them in the hospital, um, counsel somebody who's going through withdrawal, somebody who's grieving, somebody who's anxious about something going on in the life of their child. That type of stuff. I mean, and you can ask AI for talking points, but the quote bedside manner of the pastoral role cannot be digitally like I think our sci-fi tells us where we want to go. What's the Matrix scene where you just download the information on how to fly a helicopter, right? Isn't that so cool? Where you download the information in your brain of how to do martial arts. If it's all about information, then that's a laudable goal. But I'm saying basic like churches don't usually hire a preacher pastor based off of who has memorized and can regurgitate the most information. So the information has to be there. AI, online education, fine. That'll cover the bases. But I think in my mind, this opens up some really creative opportunities for thinking about that rounding out the fullness of and the wholeness of human interaction. The the part that I struggle with here is like, I don't know, Cameron, have you ever taken like an official spiritual formation class? It's they're miserable. Um, I don't know what your experience has been, but it's like,
It
we are
wasn't
now
good.
going to give you 3 credit hours to learn how
Yes.
to, in 5-day units, go through the spiritual disciplines, and you're just like,
Mm,
this
it wasn't
feels
good.
forced."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're definitely gonna have to rethink how we do that. So
Well,
anyway, I see great opportunities, and the dangers are only if we allow ourselves as humans to become overly wowed by massive amounts of information.
well, one general danger I see there is, and this isn't directly related to the seminary. This is broad, but in the same way that Google Maps had us outsource a certain terrain region of our brains, except for Nathan. If you're on the road with Nathan, Nathan will not. He'll take it as a direct challenge. It's a sort of a challenge accepted moment if you try
Shampoo
to
the
bust
inter-Holton
out.
pigeon.
Yes, Google Maps. I've been on the road with Nathan and I've seen it done, and he can still use that region of his brain. I, however, cannot. So many of us. I mean, my dad was an absolute whiz with a map when we were growing.
I also live in a place that only has 3 roads, so don't be too impressed.
Well, there is that, yes, and limited cell service too. However, but when I was on the road and, through Western Europe, when dad was an itinerant speaker going all sorts of places, a lot of this stuff wasn't very well it wasn't very well labeled on the map either. We're talking about former communist nations and all of that. So a lot of this was extremely murky, and my dad had this impeccable sense of direction. Well, that is a skill that's a lost art these days. And yes, technology is partially to blame for that. But what happens when we offload our thinking to AI, which is, I think, one of the ways it is being and is going to be misused. We already have the challenge of students who, I mean, anybody who's friends with a professor or knows professors knows that if they're in the humanities, they're dealing with constant, they're having to constantly root out all of the AI cheating that's taking place, but, offloading your thinking basically, and or outsourcing your thinking to this unit, and that is something that because, I mean, if you get in the habit of not actually thinking through something, and that is
But we're already there. This is not unique to AI.
no, it's not, but it's blowing up more so than before, and that's something. Yeah, you're right, though. That's fair. Point taken. We are already there. We've been there for a while. The way has already been paved for that kind of mental lethargy, hasn't it?
Yeah, so I'm saying the issue is not AI, it's humanity. The thing that
I
makes
agree.
us susceptible here is us, not the technology.
I completely agree because if when I started playing with it with one of our friends, hi, Dr. Andy Bannister, who's an early I would characterize Andy as an early adopter with a lot of stuff, and but anyway, one of the what emerged quickly as I was looking through this with him and playing with it was, okay, if you use this responsibly and well, you have a kind of research assistant at your beck and call and disposal. Well, is that gonna replace certain people and all? Well, yes, the truth is, yes. That is a feature here. That's one of the major discussion points of AI. But it's also meaning that you can use it, in other words, as a tool. If you use it as a replacement or as a substitute, obviously that's bad. If you're using it as a tool to do serious research or something like that, or to help you gather your thoughts, that's different.
Okay. Well, let's take what you just said and make it worse. I love this part.
Hmm,
So I was reading. So Bonnie Kristen, we've referenced her before. She writes for Christianity Today. She had on her Substack. She wrote a piece on AI is coming for your church, and so it's one thing I think most people listening is like, yeah, I'm not going to go to seminary. Meh. Does this influence me? Let's think about the way in which it's going to show up in your church if it hasn't already. So I
right.
think
Yeah.
over 50% of the American population is using Chat GPT, and there isn't any data to say that Christians are more hesitant to using it than anybody else. So let's just assume that 50% of Christians in the country are using Chat GPT, including a huge chunk of the people who are producing content for your church on a Sunday morning. Um, and I mean, my wife and I have already talked about this, like how easy it is to like, you can get it to generate an image of anything basically. And so like, hey, you need a coloring sheet for the 5-year-olds on some biblical story, type it in, generate a
You
coloring
want a
sheet for, yeah,
brochure? You want a brochure? You want, yeah,
brochure, your bulletin probably in
emails?
the future. I mean, all of those services will be
Yep.
easily done. But then you get so she linked a couple stories. Let me see if I can pull these up here that I thought were fascinating. Just in so here's a pastor of a very large church saying the way to use AI in sermon prep is as a high-powered research assistant. That's what you just said, right? That
Yeah.
you double check for accuracy. One of my favorite
Oh, yeah.
prompts is this: give me 20 interesting facts about, then fill in the blank, the preaching text, that are historical, cultural, linguistic, archaeological, or theological that most Christians don't know.
Mhm.
So, can it do that?
That's great. I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with
Oh,
that. That's a
yeah,
fantastic use of it.
except for my vision of a good sermon is not something that gives me 20 facts I didn't know. So,
Well, you don't have
w-
to incorporate all of this
I
into the
know,
sermon.
but
This
I'm
this can structure some of your prep in the process, but if it
it,
becomes a kind of surrogate, now you got a problem.
yeah. So it comes back to the question of what is a sermon? What is church? And then so she's saying the problem isn't AI. The other one that she links in there is apparently I had to go look and check this. There is a AI generated video of Barron Trump playing the piano singing Holy Spirit in Me.
Mm,
And
mhm.
so it says, Barron Trump, Holy Spirit in Me, AI cover is the title. Clearly it's AI. If you look at the 176,000 comments,
Yeah.
they're like, "This is beautiful. Baron has such a wonderful angelic voice. He really needs to be using this talent more. Praise God." I mean, it's just like, who knows if those are even humans? They might be bots themselves. But the human
Mhm.
capacity to think things are beautiful that they want to be true, that's where we're vulnerable.
That, but also, yeah, the so I think again, tool, nothing more. So when I say tool, yeah, helping you to, maybe sort through some historical periods. But again, I found some mistakes in Chat GPT, a few times. You do want to double check where I've thought, hey, that doesn't look right. And sure enough, do a little research on it and it's not quite right. So and even but moving past that, should this replace so here's how I think the responsible use should look. Yeah, you can use it as a helpful tool and assistant. And I like to use it to tell me what are some of the best books written on this subject.
Mhm.
A lot of people I fear are going to use it as summarize all of these books
Okay.
so that
So let's
in other words, now you don't have to read them anymore. This thing will do that for you. That maybe there's some room for that sometimes, but I don't want to I reading the book, the slow slogging work of crawling through chapters and careful arguments the very human process of scratching my head and thinking, "Wait, did I get that right? I need to reread that." That is essential for reaching true understanding and not outsourcing your mind to a machine. And I think also the word here, Nathan, to bring it back to the pastoral observations you made, stuff that can't be taught in a book. We need to make a sharp division between just merely theoretical knowledge and actual applied lived experience. This is why doctors have to do a residency. But with regard to pastors and God's people, I mean, a really good word here, which is one that I've heard you use before, is habitus.
Mhm.
A
Yep.
certain, a habit, a deeply ingrained habits that are shaped by your interactions and experiences with other human beings by sitting with somebody on their deathbed and reciting Psalm 23 to them, or, by counseling people as their marriage is in
What
crisis.
we're
Just
saying is
all the normal pastoral stuff.
well,
Yeah.
the physical embodied stuff is what we're talking about here.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm saying that the reading of a book is part of that habitus as well. I see it in
Mhm.
those terms. Now it's more in the theoretical camp, but in terms of you actually working your way through the text and doing so slowly. I've said this over and over again, yet we are slow. Human beings, we don't operate like computers and machines. The AI is very, very fast. It spits this stuff out instantly. But if you want to wrap your mind around something, you gotta do less better and you gotta slow down. That's just a fact that you have to accept our human limitations. And of course, there are the tech bros and the Elon Musks will say, yeah, human beings are obsolete in this sense. They're railing against. There's a kind of Gnostic opposition these days to just being a good old finite, limited human being, which guess what? Elon Musk and all the tech bros are as well.
Yeah,
That's not
you
changed.
can't escape it. So,
No.
all right, tell me what you think of this, Cameron. So you sent me the Mere Orthodoxy article yesterday. I read it. And then this morning, before we recorded, just for fun, I just dropped the link in Microsoft Copilot and said, summarize this link. Spat out 2.5 paragraphs instantly. And then I said, what does the article mean by formation? Another 2 paragraphs. Boom. Look at that. I did
Yep.
all of this work in so is that a tool or is that a shortcut? And go.
It's a shortcut.
Yeah, it is.
It's absolutely a shortcut. And again, because what everything I just said earlier was if you wanna think well, so if you want talking points and you wanna superficially recite and regurgitate facts about the article, hey, you can do that. You grab that summary. If you actually care about understanding the article and thinking it through, you gotta read the article. I mean, we're just talking about an article and a relatively short one at that.
No, yeah, but
But
okay,
yes.
here's so we're I think here's the thing, Cameron, is that we are trying to think theologically and holistically in terms of the expansive heart, soul, mind, strength, this integrated, complex,
Well, may I give you an
magnificent thing
example
that is
here?
to be a human, but not everybody is. So I, I have a friend who just finishing an engineering degree.
Mm,
She was assigned a task. The guest speaker came in and said, "Did you guys write this thing?" And they're like, "Yeah." And the guest professor was like, "And you used ChatGPT to do it, right?" And they're like, "No." And he's like, "Why not?"
mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the professor had the expectation that the students were already going to use this tool to summarize vast amounts of data and spit out a 2 page report. And so if you're thinking of this entirely in terms of efficiency and can you find the right answer the fastest, like this is here, you wanna hear me dating myself? I remember when I was in high school, we would have courses in the computer lab in high school on how to do a good Google search and get the results that you
Yeah.
wanted and how
I
to
remember.
evaluate the
Yeah.
results. Um,
Mhm.
you're nodding like you used to do that too. That is the new skill is how do you get the AI to tell you what you actually want.
Yeah, how to use it really efficiently and effectively. Yeah, and there are different so I often demonize the word pragmatic, and I wanna not do that here. a certain type of pragmatic mindset will rate the quality of your work pure or the process of your work purely in terms of its efficiency and speed. But there's another way to look at this as well, and I think this is also pragmatic and practical, and that's, is this person able to actually learn in the process, and are they actually able to gain any level of understanding and articulacy? Let me give you a specific example here. I have friends in the engineering fields, and they're having a major struggle with younger engineers because they are competent and highly effective at some of their technical tasks, and they are marvels of incoherence when they try to communicate and they
So
try to articulate anything. And I've come across multiple younger people who were talking about the importance of, I need a speech coach. I need like a communications coach because I can't I can't stop with these filler words. And part of that, and so they recognize, some of these people recognize, many people don't, but some people recognize this is a problem because it's marring my credibility a little bit. It makes me sound kind of like a novice, kind of immature. But it's also a byproduct of people who aren't used to the skill set of using language well and thinking well. So there are practical outworkings, and also there was a big kerfuffle about this a while ago saying that even highly, tech conscious places are wanting to hire people with philosophy, history, and English, humanities degrees,
mm,
because these are some of the few people who have actually cultivated the skills of independent thinking. They're able to think outside the box rather than people who are just technically trained
well, okay,
and who
here's the
yeah,
thing. On that
yeah.
is, let me say the sentence and then you help me decide if this is true. I think any degree, so I'm talking about an academic degree here, that you use AI to generate the information that you need to achieve that degree, that career itself will be replaced by AI.
Yes.
So
Sure.
so ri so right now we have a lot of humans that are like the
If it's
middleman,
leading
so to s
with the initiative, yes. I mean, then you're already in obsolescence.
right. So basically, like, w in a real world application, why does your employer need you to tell them the thing that AI told you?
Mhm. Well, in that sense, Nathan, there is an argument to be made, and I think I'm seeing murmurings of this as well. Naturally, in the field of the humanities, you read a lot of those articles, and there are different mixes of sadness, fear, anxiety. But I think there's also an argument to be made that, actually, somebody well trained in the humanities who did things the old school, old fashioned way, plows through books, and is in those habits of mind, is actually going to be able to use AI better than almost anybody
Mm.
else out there.
See, but here's
That would be
yeah,
interesting argument for it.
I'm with you on this, but I think that will only last for one generation. And the
Perhaps.
reason and the reason I think this is that when you say, "Give me the top books on this topic," or something, you're recognizing them off of your already physical lived experience as the right
Mhm,
answer.
mhm.
What happens when we run out of the lived experience that we can compare the right answer, like, what the right
Yeah,
answer is or isn't there?
when that's weeded out, yes. Well, but if you still have a tradition, maybe a smaller one, but I mean, I think the humanities, I mean, there are always going to be intellectuals. There are always gonna be people who love great books and all that. I don't think those people ever go away. Ever since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, there have been people bewailing the death of literacy, and it's really gonna happen.
Yeah,
It's finally happening. Never has, and it won't, and there are still voracious readers everywhere. They find, I mean, maybe it finds different mediums of expression sometimes, but they remain. People are always gonna be reading Jane Austen and Dostoevsky and the ancient Greeks.
yeah,
That's not changing. So, if those people are still there
and
and
the
there are
Gospel of
still
John.
right, and there's yes, and scripture. There are still training there are people still training, in those classical or perennial skills, then it stands to reason that you'll still have people who are, but again, these yeah, some more could be said there, but
Hey, you know one organization that's doing some interesting things at attempting to address this hybrid model? Thinking Out Loud. Let me put a little plug in here for something that we recently did as a trial run. And if you're interested in this, shoot us an email at info@toldtogether.com and be like, I'm interested. So here's what we do. We're looking at we used in this case, Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary has 10 free online classes. So We had a cohort of 8 students who went through, they listened to 13 lectures on biblical interpretation. Some of them kept up with the assignments and wrote little like weekly summaries and feedback things on that. And then we all got together one weekend and I taught like 9 hours on biblical interpretation. We sat around the kitchen table with our pens and pencils and Bibles and stroked our chins and made listening noises and asked each other good questions. And I kind of put my own spin on like, this is how this information actually plays out in the real world. Here's some things that have changed. Here are things to look out for. This is how this can be abused and misused. This is how this is connected to that. This is why this denomination is different than this. This is, um, and it was a ton of fun. And I think we'll do it again on a different topic, but we can certainly run another lap of biblical interpretation. But think what happened there, Cameron. We got an entire semester of somebody with a PhD in the topic teaching on it for free. Like it cost us nothing
Right.
for that. And then it cost a couple $100 just to organize everything for the event and the online resources and stuff like that and the food for everybody. But really, somebody could have listened to that, gotten a semester of that, and then I Friday, Saturday, 9 hours of me running my mouth. You got kind of Nathan. That'd be like going to a college class for 3 weeks, basically. Um,
Mhm. Yep.
and in 2 days of fellowship and drinking tea and laughing together, that was a pile of information that was crammed into a very small amount of time because we were using online digital, like the stuff that was on the online stuff was very basic introductory. Everybody needed to know it. I didn't have time to go teach through that. So it was sweet. I'd be like, okay, listen to this. And then I'm going to put my polishing spin on it at the end. Saved me a ton of time, saved them a ton of time, gave them a lot of flexibility. They were all still doing whatever with their local churches. To me, that seems like kind of the best of both worlds there and will be the way of the future where we're saying, okay, have this information in your mind, get it however, and it'll
Mhm.
be digital. And then let's come
Mhm.
together and think about in the physical world and in the tangible ministries in which we're involved, how do we apply this information in a Christ-like way? How do we become beholders of the glory of God and reflect that in the world around us? How do we use Scripture well when we're teaching, not to be heretics and to be thoughtful in addressing questions? So this is something that, on one hand, you're like, oh, people need to think about this. Like we've been thinking about this for a couple months and already working on some behind the scenes stuff there and just the beta testing forms of it. So anyway, if you have any questions about that or excitement, send me an email at info@toltogether.com. If you have further questions about that, we might be rolling that out in a bigger way soon. So just wanted to shamelessly plug the fact that this isn't new. We're thinking about how to do this well.
Very exciting developments, and in some ways, this what this reminds me of, Nathan, we've said this before, is this kind of Labrie for the 21st century. Somewhat what Francis Schaeffer was doing in the 1970s, where you had a lot of, sort of spiritual pilgrims and wayfarers who would stop by, and I mean, it was just they were doing life together. They were asking deep questions, and these were not one-off conversations. They were
Mhm.
relationships where people really Christians, mature Christians, walked side by side with these seekers and really explored these issues in great depth, but also just poured into them as persons.
Yeah.
I think,
I s
I mean, we're there again. I mean,
the
people
hunger
in it.
the hunger is coming back for that. So that's why I don't think AI is going to blow everything out of the water and it'll be the end of anything.
No, and here's a quick, just practical solution to if you're feeling afraid or nervous, switch into analytical mode. I'm pretty confident that our TOL listeners will be able to do this. Just start thinking about it in careful sort of, so analyze the problem and consider it, because that will help you, that'll guard you against going into a reactionary mode or being too fearful or too anxious. We want to be thoughtful about it, prayerful about it and thoughtful about it, but think it through. But also, in an age where so much is depersonalized and so much is being outsourced to machinery or software, whatever whatever it is, there's a tremendous hunger for face-to-face interactions, close and
Mhm.
personal. This is why backyard seminary is such a brilliant idea. People want to be, not only they don't want to just hear Nathan, they want to be with Nathan, tug on his beard a little bit. Please don't do that. I'm just kidding. But be
Touch
with
those
him
orbs.
and
The
right, and see the animals at his house and just see how he's living. That's what people want. They don't just want information. They want real wisdom on how a life is
well,
lived
so
well.
so this is where AI will be a disruptor in this, is that, um, we're coming to a point in time in which the degree itself doesn't matter. There is a pragmatism to it. And so I think, when I came up with the phrase backyard seminary, the model there is I don't have any horticultural degrees. I grow some pretty great stuff in my backyard. So
Yeah, you
is the
do.
degree what's important or a heirloom tomato? And I think we're coming into a world where AI is saying, yeah, but actually, if this guy can code like a maniac, doesn't matter if he has a stamp of approval from Cornell.
Hmm.
And those distinctions are becoming less and less. And so I think the same thing is going to happen in the church of, oh, this guy has a degree from XYZ theological seminary, and this person knows the name of my children and my mother in the hospital, and the family cares for me, and I've slept on their couch when I was going through a hard time.
Yep. Yep.
And those aren't mutually exclusive. Don't hear me saying that. I'm just
Sure.
saying one of those maybe is easier to cheer for and inspire and provide information
Hmm.
to in a whole new way. So my summary, and then I'll stop, Cameron, is yeah, is it different? Sure. Are
Yep.
humans different? No. Therefore, I'm excited about the gospel potential for most forms of technology. And just like every single other one, we'll have to navigate well how much of what we want to use and where it's helpful, where it's a tool, where it's a tyrant, where it's a distraction, where it's entertainment, and where it's a huge waste of time and a false sense of hope. Yeah, it's
I'm
nothing
with
new.
you.
We'll work through it.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. We'll be back on this one too, because yes, it's a fascinating field, and it's the sorcerer's apprentice. It's growing at an exponential rate. So we'll be back. But thank you so much for listening. And in case you missed it in all of this, this is Thinking Out Loud. It's a podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.